The copper-tasting air of Philadelphia didn't smell like the harbor or the tanneries anymore. It smelled of ozone, burnt hair, and the terrifying, sterile scent of scorched stone. Above the birthplace of the Republic, the sky had been replaced by a geometric nightmare. The Harvester hung like a jagged shard of midnight over Independence Hall, its obsidian surface absorbing the sunlight and radiating a low, subsonic hum that rattled the teeth of every man, woman, and child left in the city. They hadn't come for our land and they hadn't come for our gold. They had come for us. They were harvesting the populace, pulling people into the belly of that black pyramid as if we were nothing more than grain for a cosmic granary. Captain Jeremiah Sterling wiped a mixture of soot and sweat from his eyes, his knuckles white as he gripped the walnut stock of his Springfield rifle. He stood behind a barricade of overturned trolley cars and sandbags at the intersection of Chestnut and 6th, the very heart of the American spirit. Around him, the remnants of the Pennsylvania National Guard were shivering, not from the bite of the autumn wind, but from the sight of the drones. The drones were small, saucer-shaped discs of the same black metal, silent as owls, drifting through the smoke to pluck screaming citizens from the ruins with beams of solidified blue light. Hold the line. Sterling's voice was a jagged rasp, a command carved out of sheer desperation. Don't look at the sky. Look at the street. If it glints, you shoot it. Aim for the center eye. A drone dipped low, its blue beam sweeping across a pile of rubble. A young private, barely 19, rose to fire his Colt 1911, but the blue light caught him first. There was no heat, no fire, just a sudden, violent upward pull. The boy was yanked into the air as if gravity had decided he belonged to the stars. Sterling didn't hesitate. He led the target, lead-breathing iron in his hands, and squeezed the trigger. Crack. The .30-06 round slammed into the drone's central iris, causing the blue beam to flicker and die. The private fell 20 feet, hitting a canvas awning and crashing into the cobblestones, bruised but grounded. Dr. Thorne. How much longer on that lightning box? Sterling roared, glancing over his shoulder. In the center of the square, surrounded by piles of discarded brass casings and crates of experimental batteries, stood a monstrosity of science. It was the Wardenclyffe Defiance, a massive Tesla cannon built by refugees from Nikola Tesla's laboratories. It was a forest of copper coils, vacuum tubes, and rotating brass rings that hissed with the sound of 1,000 angry snakes. Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose lab coat was stained with acid and grease, was frantically turning a series of lead dials. The capacitors are at 60%, Captain. I need time. The atmospheric ionization is interfering with the discharge. Thorne screamed back, his goggles reflecting the orange glow of the burning city. Time is the one thing the Union is out of, Doctor. Give me that light or we're all going into the Thresher. The harvester ship above them began to shift. The massive obsidian panels on its underside slid back, revealing a glowing orange core that looked like a dying sun. The hum intensified, a vibration so powerful that the windows of the surrounding brick buildings shattered simultaneously. A heat ray, a pillar of concentrated thermal energy, lanced down from the pyramid. It didn't hit the soldiers. It hit the roof of Independence Hall. The historic building didn't burn, it vaporized. Red bricks turned to white dust, and ancient timber vanished into cinders in a heartbeat. They're targeting the hall. They're erasing the history. Private Silas yelled, his eyes wide with a primal terror. Ignore the building. Focus on the groundwalkers. Sterling commanded. From the shadows of the scorched hall, the groundwalkers emerged. They were spindly, three-legged machines 12 feet tall, resembling the skeletal remains of a crab made of polished brass and black glass. They didn't fire rays, they fired sonic flechettes, shards of vibrating metal that hummed through the air with a sickening whistle. One flechette struck a National Guardsman near the barricade, and the vibration was so intense that the man's helmet, and the head inside it, simply disintegrated into a fine red mist. Springfield's. Rapid fire. Volley on the center walker. Sterling's men rose as one. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the bolts was the only heartbeat the city had left. They fired in unison, the lead bullets sparking off the brass legs of the walkers. It was like fighting a hurricane with a handful of sand. One walker raised a serrated limb, slicing through the metal of a trolley car as if it were wet paper. Sterling. The hall is falling. Silas screamed. Jeremiah looked back. The bell tower of Independence Hall was leaning, the scorched wood groaning under the weight of the bronze Liberty Bell. As the heat ray continued to melt the structure, the bell broke free. It fell through the floors, a heavy metallic clang echoing through the square, a sound that seemed to momentarily stun even the alien machines. Thorn. Now. The Tesla cannon let out a shriek that drowned out the alien hum. The rotating brass rings reached a blurring speed, and a corona of blue electricity began to dance around the copper spire. Dr. Thorne slammed a massive lever into the engage position. The world went white. A gargantuan arc of artificial lightning, thick as a redwood tree, erupted from the cannon. It didn't arc toward the groundwalkers. It lanced straight up, striking the orange core of the harvester ship. The air smelled of burnt ozone and ionized silver. The blue-white bolt connected the earth to the sky, a bridge of human defiance forged in the fires of a laboratory. The harvester ship shuddered. The orange light in its core flickered, turning a sickly, translucent purple. The obsidian panels began to crack, the alien metal unable to ground the sheer, concentrated voltage of the Tesla discharge. Secondary explosions rippled across the underside of the pyramid, spraying shards of black glass and glowing violet fluid over the city. "Keep the current flowing," Sterling yelled, shielding his eyes from the blinding glare. The groundwalkers, disconnected from the mothership's neural link, began to stumble. Their brass limbs twitched uncontrollably as the electrical field in the square intensified. Sterling didn't waste the opportunity. He charged, pulling a satchel charge from his belt. He sprinted past the melting remains of a carriage, dodging a dying sonic flechette, and jammed the explosives into the knee joint of the lead walker. Fire in the hole. He dove behind the statue of George Washington just as the satchel charge detonated. The walker's legs snapped, and the machine crashed into the cobblestones, its black glass eye shattering. Above them, the harvester ship let out a final agonizing groan, a sound like tectonic plates grinding together. The Tesla cannon's copper coils began to melt from the heat of the discharge, the brass rings warping and seizing. But the work was done. The mothership's gravitational stabilizers failed. The massive pyramid began to tilt, its nose dipping toward the Delaware River. With a sound that could be heard as far away as New Jersey, the harvester ship fell. It didn't crash into the city, it glided, a dying bird of prey, slamming into the river in a colossal explosion of steam, water, and alien debris. The resulting wave washed over the docks, extinguishing the fires in the lower districts. The square fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. Sterling stood up, his uniform scorched, his face a mask of gray ash. He looked at the Wardenclyffe cannon. It was a smoking ruin of molten copper and dead vacuum tubes. Dr. Thorne was slumped against the frame, his hands burned but a manic grin on his face. Silas and the other survivors were slowly emerging from behind the barricades, their rifles lowered, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Jeremiah turned toward Independence Hall. The building was a blackened shell, the pride of the nation reduced to a skeleton of scorched brick. But there, in the center of the debris, half buried in the white ash of the fallen roof, sat the Liberty Bell. It was scorched and the famous crack was wider than before, but it was intact. The bronze reflected the dying orange light of the sunset. "We saved the bell, Captain," Silas whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of grief and triumph. Sterling didn't answer. He walked over to the bell, his heavy boots crunching on the glass shards of the street. He reached out a soot-covered hand and touched the cold bronze. He could feel the faint vibration of the city, not the alien hum, but the distant, chaotic sounds of a world that refused to be harvested. "The bell didn't need saving, Silas," Sterling said, his voice low and firm. "The bell is just a symbol. We saved the people. We showed them that the sky can bleed." He looked up. The clouds were clearing, revealing the stars. For the first time in a week, the stars were just stars, distant, cold, and silent. There were no more red streaks, no more black pyramids. But the city was a graveyard, a monument to the price of survival. Jeremiah Sterling slung his Springfield over his shoulder and began the long walk toward the river. There were survivors to find, fires to fight, and a world to rebuild from the ash. The Great War had been a fight for borders. The Star-Spangled Extinction had been a fight for the right to exist. And as the moon rose over the ruins of Philadelphia, the silence was no longer a threat. It was a promise. The cobblestones were slick with alien oil and human blood, the two fluids mixing in the gutters. The air began to cool, the scent of ozone fading, replaced once more by the honest, salty tang of the Delaware. The siege was over. The harvesters had been reaped. The city was broken, but the soul of the people remained, forged in the lightning and tempered in the fire. Sterling didn't look back at the hall. He looked forward into the dark, where the rest of the country was waiting for the word that the sky was theirs once more. The metal is scarred. The bricks are dust. The people are free. The sunrise would find a city in ruins, but it would also find a city that had looked into the eye of a god and fired back. The Liberty Bell sat in its bed of ash, a silent witness to the night the world didn't end. Sterling vanished into the shadows of the waterfront, a lone silhouette against the gray dawn, and the city finally began to breathe again.